There's this long-standing concept that
Comic books were a boys' club, that they were meant for men and boys to read stories and exclude the women and girls. People have made the statement that you walk into a comic book shop and it's not inclusive, that if you're a young lady, you go in there and you feel unsafe, you feel awkward, you feel out of place, and that is a bad thing for the comic book industry. That's what people have said. Now, the question is, though, as we kind of move into today's times, is there really such a thing as boys' clubs anymore? Do we really exclude girls? And is that necessarily a bad thing? I'll give you an example. So, when I was a little kid, there were different types of cartoons. Saturday morning cartoons, greatest thing in the world, right? Well, you had the little girls who would like, the cartoons like My Little Pony, things of that nature. And then boys generally liked He-Man, Masters of the Universe. Well, the little girls out there who did not like My Little Pony also liked Masters of the Universe. They liked seeing He-Man and She-Ra kind of go on their adventures, right? But that's because that particular show was marketed to boys. And so the girls who were interested in it were interested in the type of entertainment marketed to boys. Make sense? Comic books were the same way. The girls who liked comic books when I was growing up, and the adult women who still like comic books liked them because the way they were produced was to appeal to a specific audience, most notably teenage boys, young boys, people who liked action, adventure, and what I would say escapism from the day-to-day life. They like the fantasy aspect of things. However, in the last few decades, this concept has come along that says, well, if you market something towards boys, you're excluding the girls. So what we have to do is change the way we create our entertainment to be inclusive of the girls, and that'll expand the market. The idea of chasing this mysterious market that's out there. And in theory, it works because in theory, you would be doubling the amount of people who'd want to be entertained by the comic books and those types of cartoons. However, the reality is this. When you don't market to a specific group of people, you try to make things too universal. And in making things so inclusive as to not exclude any group, well, you essentially exclude everybody because the end result is usually a boring, unentertaining medium. I think that's where the comic book industry started getting off the rails. If you looked at entertainment from comic books in the 1980s and 1990s, it was essentially action-packed adventures, guys with gigantic muscles, full of violence, beating up big monsters and beating up bad guys. The storylines, for the most part, were not that complicated. It was linear, action-driven comics with hot women in skimpy clothing, and good guys overcoming the bad guys, right? Simple. And then at some point they started saying we've got to be more inclusive. We need to include characters who are more reflective of the diverse world that we live in. Here's my deal, though. Everybody I know who got into comics in the way that they were initially done, and that it was just meant for teenage boys, full of action, full of adventure, and that's pretty much it. And those teenage boys would then grow up and write those comics, draw those comics. And there was kind of a cycle because everybody's a 14-year-old boy in the inside, in the industry, and thus other 14-year-old boys would then want to buy the books and read the books. When we started saying, well, let's change it. Let's make the storylines more reflective of what we see in society. What you've essentially done is taken away the fantasy aspect. You've taken away the escapism of the books. You've opened up this quote unquote boys club to everybody, but then it's dull. You don't have the aspects that made it attractive in the first place. And here's the thing, those people who would have been entertained and would have been brought in, those diverse people, those people who, maybe they're like myself, born in Trinidad and Tobago, maybe they're part of the LGBTQ club, maybe they're women, maybe they're girls. They generally, when they got into them because of the concept of it being action-packed adventure stories. Now you've changed them to be more inclusive, quote-unquote. Unfortunately, now those same people probably just are not that interested because it's not what they liked in the first place. Think about it. The girls who didn't like My Little Pony went and started looking at Masters of the Universe. Now, if all of a sudden you change Masters of the Universe to be inclusive to the point of you had My Little Pony type stories in there, those girls probably aren't going to watch Masters of the Universe. And that's true with minorities. That's true with the LGBTQ community. That's true of girls and women and all these different readers. We can't make things so universal, so inclusive, so afraid to exclude any sort of group that it becomes dull, pointless storytelling. So sometimes you need a boys club. Sometimes you need to specifically market to one group of people. And then have other comics that exclude the boys. Have a girls club. Have them specifically marketed towards girls. For whatever reason in the publishing industry, when it comes to comics, we go, oh, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to say that there are comics specifically meant for girls. That's sexism. That's misogynistic. We don't want to say there are comic books made for boys. That's perpetuating social stereotypes. But yet, when you look at the profit centers of book publishing outside of comic books, boy, they take a different stance, right? Think about Twilight. Think about the billion-dollar industry that is romance novels. Trust me, they're marketing towards women. They're marketing towards a specific group of people who will be entertained by that type of storytelling. So let's get back to creating comic books meant for the audience that enjoys reading those stories. So, is there a boys club? It seems to have gone away, but maybe we need to bring it back. Anyhow, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours. Thanks.